And before you start that, are we sellouts?
Yes, but let me tell you how I would define that. They were outwardly saying, in their talk, where did humor go?
Welcome to Loud and Clear, the podcast for those who give a shit about advertising. I am your host, Francisco Cárdenas, Principal of Digital Strategy and Integration at Lerma. Cannes season has passed, and the team that went to Cannes is here. We're lucky enough to have our founder and CEO, Pedro Lerma, who was on the grounds at the Costa Azul in Cannes, checking out the work and even speaking about it. For those who need a little bit of introduction of who Pedro Lerma is, he's a visionary that's been able to bring together technology, communication, and culture in the work that he has done. You're a man, from my perspective, that's ahead of his time. You have a keen perception to recognize trends in culture, a tremendous sensitivity for identifying talent, and even though a man of few words, a man whose words are chosen carefully when used, guided by his values and good intentions. I am very excited to have him here. Pedro, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
To be here, and let's talk about your experience.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Last year, I went to Cannes with you, and I do want to ask you, how much did you miss me?
I missed you tremendously, Pancho. Come on.
I missed you too, my friend. So you recently had a panel in Cannes, so this was a special visit for you to Cannes. I know you've been going for a couple of years, but this time you were able to open up and speak on a panel on a series that's called Change Makers. This spotlights inspiring leaders who champion underrepresented voices and ignite business, cultural, and or social transformations. Stories that not only changed the world, but also changed you. So let's start with the title of the presentation. I know you had a panel and you were sitting with a couple of guys, but your presentation in particular was interesting. It was titled, How Selling Out Can Make for a Meaningful World. What inspired you? What was your angle of the presentation? I really love the topic, and I know working with you for several years, I know you're very big on this.
Yeah, it's a topic that has meant a lot to me for several years, as you said, but it's something that I feel is more relevant today than it's ever been. And I set it up by talking about ideological purity. And that's this idea that we are incredibly divided as a society, and there are those within either side that don't want to work with anybody on the other side for one reason or another. And I start by giving a few examples that are collaborations that people don't know about, but they should. And the first one I gave was about Charles Koch and George Soros. So if you know them, they're political figures, billionaires. They fund lots of political activity. They're on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum. And in 2014, they came together for the first time to work on advancing criminal justice reform. And they made a lot of progress, so much so that more recently they came together again to found an anti-war think tank. They believe that there are too many wars in the world and that through collaboration that can be mitigated. And to me, that's incredible. And I remember the first time I heard about Charles Koch and George Soros working together, my question was, why don't people know about this?
Right.
I was so excited about it, and I was shocked that it wasn't talked about, and it's really disappointing. And I mean, the answer is, that kind of headline isn't going to get as big a headline as if you say something bad about either one of them, right?
Right. It's not a clickbait, right? But it's something that needs to happen more.
Totally agree.
Not only in the U.S., but I think in the world.
Totally
right?
agree. And then I talked about Colin Kaepernick and the fact that he began his protest sitting on the bench. I don't know that a lot of people know that. He started that sitting on the bench. 2 weeks later, a guy named Nate Boyer, who is a Green Beret Army veteran, who also played in the NFL, had written an open letter to Colin Kaepernick, and he said, I fought for your right to protest. In fact, I believe in your cause. In other words, I support why you're
I'm behind
protesting.
you. Yeah.
But I got to tell you, if one of my teammates, when I played in the NFL, had sat during the national anthem, I went and fought for this country. He said that would hurt. And so Colin Kaepernick reached out to him. They met, they talked, they bonded. And Nate Boyer is who convinced Colin Kaepernick to kneel. He said, we kneel if we've lost a brother or sister in battle. We kneel when we pray. It's a sign of reverence. And
so they came to a middle ground.
So from that point on, Colin Kaepernick knelt. And again, why don't people know this? I think it's important stuff. And then I talked about us as an agency working with He Gets Us. And
before you start that, are we sellouts?
I would say yes, but let me tell you how I would define that.
Okay.
So, as an agency, we talk about ourselves as being deliberately diverse. We are incredibly inclusive. We like to think of ourselves as forward-thinking. And we were approached by a Christian nonprofit. And, when they came to us, we weren't sure what to expect. But they asked us a question that was really thought-provoking. It hit us right between the eyes. And that is, how did the world's greatest story of love and compassion come to be seen as a platform for divisiveness or oppression or hate? And just from that one question, we felt like this is somebody we can work with. We may not always agree on everything from an ideological perspective or sociological perspective, but we can find common ground. And in that common ground, we can advance work that we think is more important, do something good in the world that's way more important than any differences we have. And to me, it's a simple idea, but when you look at politics, or society in general, there's not enough willingness to set those differences aside and work on commonalities. I mean, you see it in our legislature. Nothing gets done.
Right. They rather pause than take decisions.
Right. And so you could call it selling out, but you could also call it building a bridge. And so depending on how you define it, I would say, yes, I will take that title of selling out or that descriptor of being a sellout because I know the work has had real incredible impact. We've had studies that show, an increase in people who were previously skeptics about religion or faith. We saw double-digit increases in them viewing Jesus as a worthy example to follow.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have
openness to.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to all of a sudden convert or go to church, or it just means that on this journey of your spirituality, you are willing to consider Jesus an example to follow, and that is huge progress. We've also, even after our very first Super Bowl spot, we got lots of feedback. And I say, we've had all this really great feedback. We also had negative feedback, and it was feedback that we expected.
We were expecting
really,
yeah.
And on the far right, we had people like Charlie Kirk, who labeled us woke tricksters, and on the left, you had people like AOC who talked about the work as fascism in sheep's clothing. And the crazy thing is, they were watching the same ad, and that's what they took away from it. And what we've come to believe is that your reaction to that work says more about you than it says about the ad. Mm-hmm. And so we have gotten, the detractors to the work, and that's okay.
But in a way, and that's why I love the term ideological purity so much, because it feels like as a society we're raised to pick a side. We are raised to be defined, right? And what the campaign did was precisely is like, you don't have to be defined in one way or the other. Here is something that accepts you just how you are, and accepts also that you can have opinions within a range of certain topics, and it's okay. I think when you mention ideological purity and turning on its head of something we've learned in society to be something that we should be, perhaps at some point it's a little bit negative.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you talk about picking sides, I always not always, I often talk about this idea of tribalism. Tribalism is an innate behavior. So as cavemen, there was tribalism, and that was for community, that was for protection. And so that exists in us. We want to belong. And so if you think about Dallas, I've given you this example before. If you think about Dallas, we have a rivalry with Fort Worth. Why? It doesn't matter, but we do, right? Texas and Oklahoma, neighborhood to neighborhood, there can be these rivalries or these tribes. The idea or the behavior of tribalism isn't inherently bad, but it can take you to bad places. And
it can make you better in many ways.
Exactly. And that's how you end up with things like racism or like this kind of ideological purity.
Yeah. In your chat, you also talked about who you put in the room to build a campaign like the one we built. And I think with the example with Koch and Soros, it's like who was in the room was also important when they tried to make this happen. Because surely all the followers from one side have possibly the same ideas, and the same would happen with the other side. It was interesting how we built that team to cater to this campaign and the type of people we had in there. There was a very, there were thoughts that were coming from many places, right?
Yeah. It really started from when we first began discussions with this client. At one point, they asked John Lee, the principal in charge of the relationship, "Are you the right agency for a Christian campaign?" And John's answer to them was, "We're exactly the right agency. You don't want to hire a faith-based agency. You want an agency that's just heathen enough to create something that's relevant to people who have written off Jesus." And the client was like, "You know what? You're right." And so that's how we got here. And it also generated trust between the client and us. And so that gave us the freedom we needed to build what I would call this diverse team. People who are believers, non-believers, agnostics, members of the LGBTQ plus community, on and on. Because if we wanted to make something relevant to that group of people who had, like I said, maybe written off Jesus, we needed to represent that group of people.
So another angle that you talked about is feeling uncomfortable and how important it is to have in the room people that are able to make other people uncomfortable with their thinking, with their thoughts, with their angle. And that has created a campaign like the one we have today, He Gets Us. Can we talk a little bit about that? But also, can we talk about, from your perspective, if that is happening in our industry as you were over there in Kansas? Are people challenging and making each other feel uncomfortable enough?
Yeah, so within the agency, we have built a culture where people feel open to sharing their opinions, where the idea of being uncomfortable is okay. We encourage that. I mean, that's where growth is going to come from. And so, I feel good about what we've built here and it enabling, this kind of thought-provoking work. I would say that has been the case for a long time. Now, I can't speak to those agencies and the cultures they've created, but the work that moves the needle, both in terms of effectiveness, sales, things like that, is going to be work that is outside of the norm, that is different, uncomfortable, unexpected. And it has to come from, this spirit of let's go where somebody else hasn't gone.
Yes. However, there's trends, right, that happened. Like if you see the festival throughout the years, right, we see that something that's working and starts winning, everybody kind of, in their own very creative, different way, follow that trend. I've seen a couple of chats where there's a cry for change in the sense of there's a lot of campaigns that are winning happening that talk about changing the world, doing good for the world, which we love as an agency. But there's also a cry for where is humor? Where has it gone? Right?
Yeah, you're right. It has for years been there where, the work that has to do with domestic abuse or mass shootings or cleaning up the oceans is the work that tends to be awarded. But that's not always the case. And I would say we have moved to a point where that is less prominent than it has been in the past. There's work that is funny. There's work that is, more irreverent. And as an example, I go back to, I think this was 2019, Jeff Goodby and Rich Silverstein were awarded the Lion of St. Mark's. And they were outwardly saying, in their talk, where did humor go?
Right.
And for an agency like Goodby Silverstein, they have a legacy where a lot of that work that is famous from them is funny work. And they showed kind of a historical reel up on the stage, and it's outstanding, really memorable work, and it's funny. And you know what? I think right now the world needs funny more than we need the serious stuff.
I agree with you. I was catching up on some of the chats, and I saw a chat where Bill Nye was on it. It was by an agency called 21 Grams, or a group called 21 Grams, paired up with System 1. And they were talking about KPIs, and us being in digital, we always talk about KPIs, what's going to, really generate results, what's going to indicate that we're performing the right way. But they were talking about it. Why is laughter not a KPI, right? Like they were talking of laughter as a KPI, and I thought that was super interesting because laughter does have power. It's a tool ultimately to be remembered, and to talk about certain things that products can give you.
Yeah. Well, what you want from an audience is, to move them in some way. And that can be moving them, through some sad story, or it can be moving them by making them laugh. Studies have shown, and I remember at Cannes a presentation being done, I think it was by Eat Big Fish. Mm-hmm. And they showed that emotive work outperforms purely rational work by 2x. So, and I mean, we sit in client meetings all the time where clients, come from the perspective of, well, we need to tell them this about our product or this about our product. And yes, but when you do it through the lens of emotion, it's going to be more effective. It cannot just be, here's our product, here are our features, and you should go buy it. And so, humor, I would argue, is just as effective as any other emotion that you can create in an audience. It needs to take more prominence now than it has, in the recent past.
So also what we're seeing, how did you feel about it seems that year after year in Cannes, you see more leadership. Last year, there were CFOs, I think, invited to the festival, and there were conversations with creative and CFOs. And I think this year there were a lot of CEOs. How do you see that happening? I know you connected with some, and the Hispanic side of things also, there were things happening. Do you think that's affecting in a positive way the industry?
I do. With the CFOs, just for a little bit of context for the audience, I think it was McDonald's.
Yes.
They were up on the stage. The marketing client was up on the stage, and they brought their CFO to sit with them.
And how do we fund our campaigns?
Exactly. It was, because, a lot of times the CFO is going to be tight with the purse strings, and wanting to inspire the CFO and to recognize the power of marketing to move the needle for them, in terms of sales. And so, yeah, there's going to be more and more of that, I think. As far as CEOs, I think a lot of this is being driven by just how big the festival has gotten. It used to be just a creativity festival. It has evolved into being creativity, but also tech and also media. And there is the official Cannes programming and content, and then there's all of the unofficial. And it's really gotten overwhelming, but it's also drawing a lot more people to the event. And so, I would say the more a CEO can be interested and engaged with what happens in marketing and advertising, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I think I love it because it means that now creativity and how we tell the stories and brand stories is now being looked not only by a department within an organization, but from the top down, which I think is great. It's really how you build brands and products. So that's great. You mentioned something interesting, how much it's grown, and for me it was over. Like it seems that if you go, you're destined to experience FOMO in a very big way. Even to create gray hairs, right? But my question is, from a business perspective for Cannes, is La Croisette competing with Le Palais de Festival?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. There was speculation just in conversation around Cannes about that specifically, because there are people that now go to Cannes and don't even buy an official festival pass.
And there's great content, right?
Because there's content everywhere all day long that's worthwhile. And so I don't know how those deals are structured. I think the official Cannes Lions Festival has control of the beach real estate, has control of hotel rooms and things like that. And so there may be some benefit to them, even if it's not official programming. They may still get a cut of the money that's generated by people renting place on the beach or
and if you think of it from a content perspective, they might be having partnerships of how what to talk about and what to emphasize within their chats.
Right.
Now, full disclosure, your chat was part of the festival.
Yes, it was the official programming, and it was great. It was the first time I'd ever spoken there. When I first heard about it, I was excited, but pretty immediately I was also nervous because it's a big stage.
Which is great,
this is where the best in our business go to meet and share work and share thinking, and that can be intimidating. But I got over it. It took a little bit, but once I really landed on the topic that I wanted to share, that's really where my confidence built, because it's a topic that I've thought a lot about. I've researched it. I talk a lot about it just
for years. You've been talking about it.
To me, it's important. I believe we need more common ground and setting differences aside. And so I really was excited to go there and share my thinking.
That's awesome, and a good reception I saw. So it's great. I was able to see it. So congratulations. What do you think? So sometimes one of the things I think a lot about is what happens in the U.S. and how that is relevant across the world, right? So when you go to a festival like that, you have judges and thinkers and professionals from all around the world. What are the risks of a festival like that becoming too American, even in how we build the case studies?
Well, I don't think there's a huge risk. I think you need to be aware of it, and we are aware of it. Even thinking about, do we talk about the Super Bowl, and does everybody know what the Super Bowl is? I mean, it's a gigantic thing for us here in the U.S., but maybe not so much for people from other countries. And so it's a consideration, but it is such a kind of global stage, and the attendees are from all over the world. The work is from all over the world, and so I don't see it becoming dominated by U.S.
So what else did you like, just to wrap it up? Do you have any highlights or anything that you saw that you were like, whoa, the trends? I know they talked about AI a lot again.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was
Elon Musk was not invited.
No. So it was a huge topic, and it was interesting because I actually read an article more recently that talked about the spoken and the unspoken part of, or influence of AI in the festival. And what that meant was, outwardly people were optimistic about AI. Oh, this is going to be great. We see it as a tool for creativity. It's not going to replace us or whatever, right? But that there was this unspoken kind of nervous energy throughout the festival of people, going, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Is AI going to replace us? And there were some talks that were enlightening, and there were some that were kind of scary. A former CEO of PayPal talked about how he expects that in 3 years we will have 25% unemployment because of AI. Mm-hmm. And that is crazy and scary because, I mean, if you think about what that could represent in terms of just economic chaos, people
Right.
without jobs, just it's a scary
So
thing.
that was a topic.
Well,
in some way.
it was a broader topic, but that was a point that he made, and he's very informed and plugged into that AI community, and so it's a opinion, right? I think it's one that you have to give some credence to,
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, we are in the business of creativity, and it's really up to us to figure out how do we make sure 25% unemployment doesn't happen. So that was a big topic. Post-Can, the biggest topic is the scandals.
Yeah.
So you have
I'm
had
glad you bring it up.
many agencies who submitted work or case studies that were doctored, that showed news reports. A lot of times you've seen the case studies where, it's a newscaster and it'll talk about some great campaign that, did this unexpected thing. In this case study, whatever was being said was never said by the news anchor.
It was created, manufactured.
Yeah, and that was just one. And slowly but surely, other scandals have come up, and so I think that is a big issue that the festival's going to have to address. That the juries are going to have to find a way to really scrutinize. And I think it's going to be hard, but
it's good for the industry. I think.
I think it is good for the industry because for years. We have often seen work that we thought, well, that didn't really happen.
Did that really happen? Right.
Or that never ran anywhere, and that was frustrating because you feel like they're not playing by the rules, right? They're cheating to get attention or to win an award.
Yeah, they're not playing by the rules, and it's not having an effect on anything. Like it's not really out there changing behaviors, changing minds. It's just basically utter bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
But the truth is, the festival is 99.9% positive.
Of course.
People go there and they see the best work in the world and they're inspired and they talk to, again, some of the best thinkers in the world in our business. And you come back from that energized and you have ideas about what we can do different to make ourselves better. And there's value there. There's tremendous value there. But the scandal really has been a dark cloud here in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think it's a good message. I think it's balance of what's out there. It's el trucho, the classic trucho, which is how we call it in Spanish. It's been called out, and I think that's great. Well, at Lerma, we're super excited. I know you guys are preparing some points of information to share with the agency, and you've been doing this for a couple of years, so I think it really energizes the entire agency. So that's great, and I'm sure we'll share out some stuff on our socials, share out this podcast. Well, if there's nothing else you want to add, one thing I do want to add. I saw a Jimmy Fallon. Were you on that Jimmy Fallon?
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
I love that. And I thought it was super interesting because he's truly a champion of creativity. We've followed those who followed his career for a while, but it feels also like a challenge to the industry of how our model works with this on-brand show he's putting out. What did you think about it?
Well, first, Jimmy Fallon is incredibly creative. I mean, he's that kind of person, and even on stage, he at one point stopped and he looked at the audience and he said, "Somebody give me a product and I'll come up with an idea." And somebody said, I think they said Nabisco. And he goes, "Okay, so imagine that I'm eating a cookie in an office and I'm leaving crumbs everywhere. And it's kind of like the Hansel and Gretel, follow the breadcrumbs." And it was like, you can see where his mind is really creative. And he's doing a show where it's kind of a reality show, right? And so it'll be interesting and fun. And I think to your earlier point, my guess is a lot of what they're going to land on is humor because that's his personality.
Yeah, and I love it.
I think it should be a fun show.
So, but do you think the industry as a model is being challenged?
In general, I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything from, the pitch process, as we've seen, has changed dramatically over the last few years. To the role of AI in the workflow, in terms of compensation models. I think value-based pricing, which is something that you've been talking about for years, is going to become more a reality, as opposed to billing for hours, because the tools should enable us at some point in the near future to be a lot more efficient than we are today.
Yeah.
So it's changing.
It's exciting of what's to come.
The thing is, I have always been a champion of change.
Yes.
And I've always been willing to accept change. And I think that's important. And I think it has, for our agency, set the tone of, we are going to, be at the forefront of change. And so, can it be scary? 25% unemployment? Yes, it can be scary. Can we get ahead of it? Absolutely. And that's where our creativity comes in.
It's exciting. And I think, as I tell the team, it's like we're the generation making that change. So it's up to us where we want to go, right? So I think it's exciting. Well, great. Well, thank you for the time, Pete. I know you've been in many meetings today. So thank you for taking the time and coming up to Tell Me More Studios to talk to us about your experience and the chat you gave. I thought it was very, very, very good. Very good messages. I hope we keep chatting. I know there's more content that's going to come out of this with the entire team that went to Cannes. So we'll keep talking.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
So this has been Loud and Clear, the podcast for those who give a shit about advertising. Please listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, iTunes, anywhere where you listen to your podcast. Listen, follow, like, comment. Thank you very much. And we're out. Pete, thank you.
Thank you.